Hey guys, welcome back to the Crafty Couple. Today we have a super fun Halloween DIY. Halloween is one of my favorite holidays, so I'm super excited for this video, and let's jump in and get started. First item we're going to be using is one of these skeleton hands. Now, if you wanted to keep it really basic, you could just glue the hand on like this. But what I wanted to do is go for a more realistic look and give it more character. So what you want to do is cut off the fingers on all of the joints here, as you can see, and go through each individual finger and cut them all off. And I'm just using a regular pair of scissors to cut the fingers off. It should cut fairly easily for you. And like I said before, feel free, if you don't want to do this, you can just glue the hand on. It's just not going to have as much character or look as real. So if you've got the time and the patience, I would highly recommend to do it. The next part is we want to create a thumb, and since all of the fingers here stick straight out on the Dollar Tree hand, it's a little weird looking, so what I'm doing is cutting this down at a little lower part on the end finger, and we're going to use this to create kind of a thumb, and we'll end up turning that outwards. As you can see right here, we're going to adjust it a little bit so it's more angled out instead of just straight forward like all the other fingers. When we're gluing these onto the hand, I found it's easiest to put a little bit of glue on the end of the finger that we cut off, just as you saw there, and then just hold it down for a few seconds and allow that glue to dry so it sticks firmly. You do want to make sure that you give the glue enough time to dry in between these. It can be a little bit delicate if you just try to glue them all on together, and then they might start falling off. So just hold it for a few seconds and allow it to dry. While you're gluing the next pieces on, you want to kind of create that curve. So make sure that you're gluing the next pieces so that they eventually curve back around. So what we want to do is give this hand the look that it's holding the candle and not just sticking straight out, and giving it that character. After we've created the thumb, we can move on to the other fingers, and what we're going to do here is slightly curve these, and as we get around to the pinky, I'm going to actually end up curving the fingers a little bit more. So instead of having them all curve the same amount, just kind of play around with them and get an idea of how you like that to look. But I think that making them curve a little bit differently gives it more character and a little bit more realism. I did want to mention too that when you're cutting off the fingers originally, try to keep them all together for each finger. When I first tried to do this, I just cut them all off and put them all into a group, but I found that it was a little bit hard to sort through them and make sure I had the right sections with the right fingers. So if you keep them separated by each finger when you cut them off, it's a little bit easier to put them back together and make sure that they fit right. Next, what we want to do is go ahead and paint our hand. Again, if you wanted to, you could just leave it as is, but we're going for more realism, giving it more characteristic and making it look like an actual weathered skeleton hand. So what I like to do is put down a base of white paint, and I ended up doing 2 coats over the whole hand. I'm using this white Waverly chalk paint. You could use acrylic as well if you wanted to, and then you can pick up the chalk paint from Walmart. So in case you were wondering, feel free to stop by. You should be able to pick up any of those Waverly chalk paints. You do want to make sure that the 2 coats of white paint are dried really well for the next step that we're doing. So while I'm letting that dry, what I'm doing here is just giving this plate from Dollar Tree kind of a weathered old look. And I like to use this black paint from Waverly. It's a chalk paint again. It's ink is what it's called. and I like to use a sponge and watered down paint. So you want to just give it a very subtle color on here to make it look like it's aged. It's not as bright, and that way you still get a little bit of the reflection, but it just really dulls down that shine from the mirror. Once our white paint has dried on our hand, now we want to go in and start giving it a weathered look and more color. So I'm using this Truffle Paint from Waverly. It is a chalk paint again, and we're going to be using a sponge and watering it down a little bit. So the first thing we want to do is go in and get some color into all of these creases. I'm sure you can imagine if this was an older hand, it would have dirt and grime and everything that has settled into those creases. So that's the first thing that we want to do here. And the method that I'm doing right now is actually one that I used last year when I did the Sconce Chandelier. So if you guys have not seen that video, that was probably one of my favorite crafts that I've ever made. I think it turned out awesome. I actually used it at a work party and everyone absolutely loved it. So if you haven't seen it, we'll have a link for it right here. But I promise if you guys love Halloween, you will love that video. So moving on here, as you can see, we've got that dirt and grime and that dark color in those creases. And then we can start wiping away the rest of the hand because we don't want it all that dark. We just want to have those creases really dark and the rest of it just a little bit of that brown color. The reason I like to use the sponge and the water is it allows you to blend this a lot easier than if you were just using a brush or even just a sponge with straight paint, because that tends to go on really heavily. So by watering it down, it just allows you to work it around a little bit more. And then I also like to use a wet paper towel to then go in and kind of remove some of that paint and blend it even more. It's just something that I found that works for me, and I think works really well for this kind of skeleton look and aging projects. So let me know if you like this and if you've ever used this technique by watching some of our older videos. I'm kind of interested to know if you guys like it as well. Just remember too, you want to get kind of a heavier, darker color around the knuckles and any of these creases on the back side. I did notice after I had gone through with most of the brown paint, there were some spots around the knuckles that were still white. So just be careful and look for that. You want to avoid any of those straight white colors because it will definitely show. Once we have both our plate and our hand painted, we can move on to gluing it together. I'm just using some hot glue from Dollar Tree and put a very heavy amount on the back and then go ahead and glue that on the bottom. And we're going to be putting just one of those artificial candles, so it's not heavy. I wouldn't recommend doing a real candle because of the fire, and then also it's heavier, so it might not hold up as well with just the hot glue. But just glue it at the bottom there, and then we're going to use one of these fake candles from Dollar Tree. And to finish our project, we can add the blood effect to the candle. A very simple way to do this is to use a crayon or another candle and simply melt it. Just allow that to flow naturally along the top and down the side of the candle, and that will be absolutely perfect. So let me know if you like this technique, and then also what you think about the technique I use for painting the actual hand. And then again, if you love the Halloween stuff, make sure to go check out that Sconce Chandelier. I promise you will love that video. It's one of my favorite projects that I've done. And then also here at the end of the video, I did put a real candle, one of the little tea candles, in the top of this just to give it that flame effect. I would not recommend to do that since it is actual fire. I was just doing that to show you guys, so please don't do that. Be careful as always. But I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, please give it a thumbs up. And as always guys, make sure to subscribe and hit that bell icon so you can be notified every time we upload a new video.